But under communism, wouldn't a janitor be paid the same as a doctor? Doesn't that discourage innovation? Just like every single argument against communism, this one completely misunderstands what it is. What the question misunderstands is that socialism, which was probably what was meant, doesn't mean everyone is paid the same, just that everyone has common ownership of the means of production. And as I'll cover in the next section, there are more things than just money that incentivize humans. As for innovation, just ask yourself which country went to space first. Which country industrialized at a rapid pace, turning from a backward semi-feudal country to a world superpower? If you're looking for innovation in socialist countries, there's plenty there. Historical examples of socialism, like the Soviet Union, have provided free healthcare, education, subsidized housing that foster an environment for learning. On the other hand, capitalism gives you extortionate prices for healthcare, thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and rent payments to your parasitic landlord. Imagine how many possible scientists or visionaries have died before they could achieve anything because they were unlucky enough to be born in a poor family under capitalism. If it conflicts with profits, capitalism also often ignores and discourages science, like in the case of oil companies denying climate change. Any innovation that does take place is usually for the benefit of the capitalists, not us. Ask yourself why, when a new machine or program that can replace workers gets created, workers get laid off. The answer is that capitalists are calling the shots and want to cut costs.
Sithis, I ask that you show restraint in this one because he just dumped like 10 topics on you.
Yeah, okay. So so the first argument that he's making is that we'll have common ownership of the means of production. So the issue with common ownership or collective ownership is because is that scarce resources can't be used in exclusionary ways by two individuals, and ownership is the right to use or exclude a scarce resource from another person. Two people can't. So, for instance, if me and you are on an island and we collectively own a stick, right? And I want to use the stick and you want to use the stick, in an exclusionary way, like you want to use it to set it on fire, and I want to use it to stab an animal to eat it. Well, then both of us can't both use it at the same time. So there must be a way to settle that dispute. And the way that we think that is the best way to settle that dispute is through a consensual, in a consensual manner, which means that the first person who came to the good is the owner, and the second person is not the owner. And the person who is the second comer, who takes it from the first comer, is violating the first comer's goods. And why it necessarily is that property right must be individual is because, again, of the fact of scarcity. Two people can't use the same thing at the same time. Only one person could have the right. And what I mean is an action that ought not be impeded when I say a right. Only one of them could have the right to use that thing at that time. So the person who you believe should have the right to use that thing, you're saying, okay, this person ought to have the right to own that thing. He is the owner because he has the right to exclude it from other people. So that's the reason why collective ownership doesn't really work, because if two people say they own the same thing and they have a dispute over it, well, and one of them is able to use it despite the other person's doing, well, then that person who is able to use it is really the one who is claiming ownership. He's the one that's claiming ownership over it despite you. So he's excluding you from it without your consent. And if someone's allowed to exclude something from you without your consent, well, then you're not really the owner. They're claiming to be the owner. They're taking it from you. It's like if I came up to you and I took your phone without your consent, I'm using what makes it wrong is that I'm using what belongs to you without something that belongs to you without your consent. So that's why collective property doesn't really work, because it breeds conflict. There's no way to settle a dispute over two people who claim to own the same thing. If they both claim to own the same thing and we have no way, then we have no way to settle that dispute unless we have a way to determine who has the best link to that thing, and then that person would have the right to use it. Money isn't the only thing that innovates people to do things. He is correct about that. But when you live in a country where we use money as a medium of exchange, right? That is a huge thing that influences people to do things, because you can use that money to buy things in which you want. You know what I mean? So that's generally what people mean when they say that, and money is what incentivizes people to work. But he is correct that money isn't the only thing that incentivizes people to work. But the thing is, if you take away people's money, and you take what he's arguing for is taking away the incentive to work, which is essentially taking away your money, having somebody at the top choose what will you do with your money, because he believes that the state or the people at the top, the price coordinators, are better at coordinating goods and services than you and all the millions of other people who engage in the economy. They take all that stuff and then they distribute it amongst people, and that's really what he's talking about. So there still is like a so even though there isn't a so when you take away the profit incentive, you're giving people less of a reason to work. When you don't have money and you don't actually get money from the labor that you're doing, you're kind of like taking away what would normally like what incentivizes people to go to work is not simply just to get money, but it's the things that you get for the things that you get money from. So if you take that away, then they can no longer have agency over what their labor can get them. And it's basically chosen by people at the top, like these communists, that they believe are better at making decisions than the peons below.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually real quick just take this a different direction and address the point of won't equal pay discourage innovation. And I actually had a talk with First Amender a little bit about this, but it was this idea that in a socialist or a welfare state where people have more welfare and privileges, like they'll be more creative and like more people will live and then they'll be able to like pursue higher education, which will also be paid for by welfare. Well, the reason I disagree with this is that in a welfare state, what happens is everybody is taxed a lot of money, and then this money goes into welfare programs, which is then redistributed to the lower parts of the economy. But the thing is, we don't have anything to compare it to. So this is what successful and wealthy people do. When they get money, what they do is they actually continue to invest their money. Low time preference individuals, what they will do is they actually normally live minimalistic lifestyles compared to the kind of money that they bring in. And so they'll just invest this money back into the economy. And the thing about investing in the stock market is it is sort of just a giant R&D, research and development, what would you call it? Investment. That's what the stock market is. You put money into it, and then companies use this money. What do they do it for? Well, they use it to grow their businesses. They do it for research. They do it for experimentation. And in fact, when investors put their money into the economy, that is R&D. That's research and development. And so if we weren't actually ever taxed, we would have a ton of money pouring into the stock market. Tons and tons of billions and billions of dollars would be going into the stock market. And we would see a tremendous amount of experimentation and like highly risky experimentation too. Like nowadays, people don't do risky experimentation. But if we were in a free market, people would have so much wealth and money. There would be an enormous amount of innovation and experimentation because people have so much money that they are able to lose and still get by. So I don't agree at all with this idea that if we have a welfare state where we trim off the money from over $60,000, $80,000, we tax everything above that 30%. I think that it would be far more productive if in a free market system, we just naturally let billionaires and people with lots of money just pour their money into the market. And naturally, from that point on, companies would experiment and have research and development.
Also, I don't think there's anything wrong with inequality if the person who is unequal earned how they came to that point. So if I create a good or service for another person that they really like and they pay me millions of dollars because I've I've provided something really cool, maybe like a new sneaker or, think of anything. And a lot of people pay me to create that. And I'm unequal. Someone's more wealthier than me because they did that. Well, then I don't consider that to be a bad thing, right? It's only a bad thing if what they're taking is unconsensual, if they're violating another person's rights, So I don't see the reason why we need to have this forced, what you call it, equality or equality of outcome, because if it seems to me like there's nothing wrong with a person making more money than me so long as they do it in a way that doesn't harm anybody else. Like it doesn't harm me that another person is rich.
These opening memes are
never work
hilarious.
because of human nature.
Yeah.
Humans are too greedy and lazy to do stuff unless we had a monetary incentive like we do in capitalism. Well, let's see. What other incentives could there be besides gaining money and power to get people to do stuff? I don't know. What about survival, bettering another person's life, passion, satisfaction with your work, curiosity, boredom, an output for creativity, necessity, and companionship? What do you think happened before capitalism came about? Did people just sit down in caves and die from hunger because they didn't have any monetary incentive?
For the record, capitalism is just a free market, so capitalism has always existed before anybody could manipulate the market.
Also, just simply because you're financially profiting doesn't mean that you're not profiting. I mean, there's also such thing as a psychic profit. So, he is right that simply profiting monetarily again doesn't automatically mean that that's the only thing that is going to incentivize you to do things. There are plenty of other things that you can do that don't make you money that will incentivize you. So for instance, like if I see a homeless person on the side of the road, right? And I'm financially lose if I give him like $2, right? But I'm psychologically profiting because I feel better about giving him the $2 than me having it in my pocket. So it makes me feel better to give him the $2 because I want him to eat something or something like that. So he is right about that. But again, if you don't have money, then you don't really have any way to calculate what people want when they want it and for how much. Because prices aren't these arbitrary numbers in which we slap on goods and services. They are the signals that tell us how much people want for how much money they're willing to pay for it, how much of it that they need, and all of this information. So if you get rid of all that, if you get rid of money, well, then how are you going to possibly know what people want, what people need, other than the basic things that you need to survive, like maybe like water and food and new electronics? What incentivizes people to create new goods and services that you don't even know you want is the fact that they're going to make money from it.
Yeah.
Generally.
I'm hungry. Want to go gather some berries? Are you gonna pay me money? What's that? And speaking of pre-capitalism, humans spent hundreds of thousands of years living in a primitive form
he's
of
right about
communism where we lived communally. Incentives to work in human nature aren't static things, they're shaped by the mode of production that we live under. If we look at history, there are huge differences in human behavior throughout the world, and to simplify it all down to a monolithic human nature is ridiculous. As the famous saying goes, to look at people in capitalist society and conclude that human nature is egoism is like looking at people in a factory where pollution is destroying their lungs and saying that it is human nature to cough.
Sure.
Yeah. So again, like, money isn't the only thing that motivates people to do things, but the reason why it's a strong motivator is because you could use money to buy things that what you want as an individual. And again, money is very important because it's what drives our economy. It tells you what people want, what people need, when they need it, and how much for how much. You can't run an economy without prices. You can't run a economy without money. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the reason that so many people focus on money is because money is the language of resources. It's like the language of the physical world. Money is more than just food. Money is everything. Money is shelter, food, water. Money is freedom. Money is time. Money is your ability to travel. It's your ability to hang out with your friends. It's your ability to play video games. Money is this, it is a pathway to living your life to the fullest. And this is why money is so important to people, because money is energy. So yes, people are incentivized by profit, and they're incentivized by all kinds of profit. But the thing about money is it can be used to do all of these things he said. Money can be used to survive. It's money. With money, you can do like almost your options are almost limitless, because you can help people with money. You can spend time with people with money. You can go to conventions with money. Like, money is the pathway to success in the modern world. It's the way to buy your freedom so that you don't have to work a job. So money is very, very important. And this is why there's such a heavy emphasis on profit, because money can do all these great things.
Also, this whole idea that people will still work even if they're still getting paid is just nonsense. We know this for a fact. We live in a day, in a time where we have all of these gadgets and technologies and things to amuse us that that if we didn't have to work, we would find comfort in doing. You know what I mean? So, for instance, if I didn't have to go to work, if somebody was just paying me the amount of money that I was making at my job, do you think I would work the 50, 60 hours that I work a week at this specific job? Like, absolutely not. I would tone it down. I would probably maybe work not even I would probably not even work at all. I would probably just sit at home and play video games all day, you know? Obviously, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like that's a general trend with a lot of people. If you look at a lot of people, if you pay people to and give them the option to work, people are just going to choose not to work, and it's going to get to the point where these people who aren't working are the people who are working are going to have to pay for all the people who aren't working, and eventually, it's going to get to the point where there isn't going to be enough money to take from the people who are working to take care of the people who aren't working. And that's what's going on right now. Just look at the national debt. The United States national debt is what, like at 30 trillion fucking dollars right now. Social Security is in debt. Like, there's not enough people to pay. What is it? What does that say? 35 trillion. That's even more than what I thought. Jeez Louise. And our Social Security is not going to, like, there's not enough people to pay into it, then there are people taking advantage of it. I mean, it's going on right now. So if you pay people, if you take money from other people and you give it to other people, you incentivize them to not take care of themselves, because they're going to look to that person who's giving them money for more money. And then they're going to take more and more. And again, there's going to be more takers than there are makers, and that's when it all collapses. If we do not have like 3 children for each individual person to replace the amount of people who are in Social Security, we are completely fucked. We are like, our system is going to completely collapse on itself.
Interestingly, since it's difficult to attack the basic ideas of socialism and communism, like economic democracy and work empowerment, anti-communists have to find another way of shutting these ideas down. You know what I'm talking about. If you like socialism so much, why don't you move to North Korea? Or, if you're a socialist, why do you own an iPhone and a Karl Marx body pillow? Hey, insult me, but leave him out of it. Don't worry, Carl, the bullies are gone. So these arguments about socialist hypocrisy almost always never bother to address the actual ideas of socialism and serve only to attack the person talking. It's a slimy tactic that doesn't actually mean anything. The train of thought goes as follows. Socialists are against capitalism. iPhones are made in capitalism. And then their galaxy-sized brain combines these two ideas to synthesize that therefore socialists are hypocrites. The problem is that using this logic, you literally can't criticize any system at all because you're a hypocrite for living in it. I don't think I like living in a slave society very much. Haha, but you're eating food your masters gave you.
I want to say this real quick. I don't see socialists as being hypocritical if they live in a capitalistic society, but I definitely see it hypocritical if socialists are highly consuming products in a capitalist society when they don't have to, which is hilarious, because I've talked to many of my friends before who are more left leaning, and it's ironic because I'm probably like the most minimalistic person I know in my life, in that I literally I pay the bare minimum. And I know not all people are like this, but I pay the bare minimum to get by. Like I buy the cheapest food, I get the cheapest insurance, I pay the cheapest rent. So I'm basically living like, this almost like poverty lifestyle. But my friends who are like left leaning and socialists, like they go out and they eat to restaurants, they buy tons of products online, and the irony kills me because it's like, if you're a socialist, the whole idea is you're supposed to be against materialism, like the bourgeoisie and the elites are like these hyper consumer, hyper materialist people. But in fact, what it seems like is the socialists and the leftists are the most consumerists of us all.
Okay, so the reason why Okay, so the main reason why we believe that socialists are hypocritical is because they're saying that capitalism, or just any situation in which, well, not every socialist is hypocritical, just certain socialists, right? If you're going to say that in any time that you engage in a transaction with another person that is is unbalanced, like you have more money than them, or in this way, and that is coercion. Or like, let's say you start a business that isn't a capitalist business, and you don't run it in a socialist way. They consider business owners to be evil people. They consider them to be bad people, right? So for them to then turn around and then live a capitalist lifestyle and do all the things that those capitalists are also doing, which is starting businesses, making millions of dollars, not starting co-ops, drinking coffee from places that exploit people, they're doing the exact same things that these capitalists are doing, and they're saying that those people are evil. And I think that's a little bit hypocritical because they're doing the exact thing that they're saying that other people are evil for doing. They're saying that that's coercive. If you buy something that another person bought, that was created in a evil way, or was created in in a capitalist way, that's evil. Well, then you buying or being a part of that, well, then you're complicit in that because you consider that to be evil. That's like me saying, "Oh, I think that slavery is wrong. I think it should be abolished, but I'm going to hire this slave to work for me this weekend. But hey, listen to me. This system is just the way that it is. I'm still criticizing the system. I can't do anything about the system, so therefore I'm not bad for engaging this system." But what makes us and caps not hypocritical is we don't think that capitalism is a bad thing. We don't think that business owners are bad people. We don't consider any engagement in capitalism, so long as you're not initiating force against another person without their consent, to be a bad thing. And it would only be hypocritical. An ANCAP could only really be hypocritical, right? Is if they say, "Hey, I'm against aggression," but then they went around and shot somebody. You know what I'm saying? That would make them a hypocrite. But we're not hypocrites because we're not against the current system. We're against the state. You know what I mean? You're not going to see libertarians going and saying, anarcho-capitalists going and saying, "Hey, we support the state. We think it's okay to shoot people. We think it's okay to harm other people." That would make us hypocrites. What we're saying is we think that capitalism is okay. So we're not hypocrites. That's what makes us not hypocrites, and what makes socialists actual hypocrites, because they engage in the system that they criticize, that they think is evil, while also saying that it's okay for them to do it. So it's not okay for other people to do it, but it's okay for me to do it. Or ANCAPs would be like, "Listen, we don't care what you do, so long as you're not initiating force against another person." It would be hypocritical if I, shot somebody, but as long as I'm not initiating force against another person, well, then it's not hypocritical at all for me to engage in capitalism. And yeah,
I don't
that's
think I
why.
like living under
Yeah.
Feudalism very much. Haha, but you're using tools made out of feudalism. I don't think I like living under capitalism very much. Haha, but your phone and computer were made under capitalism. No matter how you spend your money under capitalism, someone is going to get exploited. That's what the "there is no ethical consumption under capitalism" meme means. Because no matter what, your consumption will always be unethical in some way. What these anti-communists are really saying is that if you're a socialist and own anything, you're a hypocrite. Which is such a good way to shut down discussion. The only way to satisfy these people is if you live in a makeshift hut in the woods, but even then they would complain that you're breathing air in a capitalist society. Not to mention that capitalism doesn't make anything, labor does. Capitalism and socialism only determine who has control over the means of production and gets paid. As for the other argument, if you like socialism so much, why don't you move to insert vaguely socialist country here? My response is, if you like capitalism so much, why don't you move to the slums of capitalist Brazil? Hypocrite. A common argument against the far left
I do think that it is a. I mean, I don't think that he's wrong when he says that. Oh well, if you like communism so much, move to a communist country. The only that automatically makes him a hypocrite because those countries are pretty fucked, and I don't think even he would really. Unless he actually considers it to be legitimate communism. Then maybe it would make him a little bit hypocritical. But the thing is, if there was a capitalist country in the United States, would I be hypocritical, or a capitalist country in the world, would I be hypocritical for not moving over there? Well, no. The argument that he's trying to make is that he wants to change the system that he's currently living to mimic that system. So I don't think there's anything wrong with advocating for that. Again, what makes him hypocritical is that he's saying that the current system that he's in is bad, while also engaging in the system and doing that thing. That's like, again, if I lived under slavery and I said slavery is bad, but here are my 10 slaves. Oh, well, what am I supposed to do? Slavery is a system. What am I supposed to do about it? Well, it's just like, that's kind of hypocritical because you're saying that you think that it's wrong. It's not hypocritical if you're a slave owner. Like if you're a slave owner and you think that slavery is okay, well, then you're not hypocritical for owning a slave because, well, you think that that's okay. Not saying that capitalism and slavery is the same, but the thing about ANCAPs is we think that there's nothing wrong with capitalism again. So us engaging in capitalism doesn't make us a hypocrite because we don't think there's anything wrong with capitalism. What would make us a hypocrite is if we engage in aggression, but we don't engage in aggression because we're against aggressions.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because I want to put this rebuttal out here before I forget. And I know if I'm talking to a socialist in the future, I might forget about this. And if they bring up the argument, if you like capitalism so much, why don't you go live in a third world country where it's like a complete free market? I think that it's not capitalism intrinsically that I want to live under. What I want to live under is a society that is peaceful, high quality, technologically advanced, safe, and respects rights, okay? So I want multiple things. I don't want just freedom. I want freedom paired with technological advancements. So that's the thing that we can't be divorced right there, because it's like, technically, I could live in a complete free market if I moved away from society altogether. But again, it would be far more negative to do that because I would be losing all of society's technology and the societal cooperation that comes with living in civilization in exchange for complete freedom. It's not worth the trade. So yes, if there was a first world country that was capitalist, yes, I would absolutely live there. But a third world capitalist country, there's too many downsides to going there. So I would prefer not to go there.
Yeah, what we're trying to do, it doesn't make him hypocritical for not moving over there, or it doesn't make us not hypocritical if there was an Ancapistan somewhere. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to turn where we live into Ancapistan. We want the place that we grew up in with all this technology and all of this cool stuff to also be more like those countries. We're trying to change the ideology. We're trying to get rid of aggression. So, there's nothing wrong with trying to make a change somewhere. Like, let's say you're an abolitionist, right? And you move to, and you live in a slavery nation. Does that make you a hypocrite because you don't want to move to, say, somewhere like New York that that abolished slavery? Well, no, because you want to stop slavery where you live because that's where slavery is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a good argument from his. But the other argument that he made, that he wasn't hypocritical because he engages in the market, or in capitalism, I think is flawed.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the far left is actually as bad as the far right. I mean, one side advocates social justice and economic equality, while the other side advocates for ethnostates and the subjugation of races of people. Jokes aside, there's an unironic strain of people who believe in horseshoe theory, that the far left is just as bad as the far right because both use violence and stuff. Such compelling evidence. Of course, horseshoe theory completely ignores any sort of deep analysis of communism or fascism. But what about the Nazi Party? Nazi stands for National Socialism, so doesn't that mean they were the same as communists? Yes, that's true, but both the German Nazis and Italian fascists purposely made sure to appear leftist to appeal to the people and muddy the waters.
Oh my God.
Apparently, they did a good job because centrists are still falling for it to this day. If we look at fascism
Wow.
itself, we can
Wait
see
a
that it's
minute.
actually closer to capitalism.
So what you're telling me is that someone in the state rose up to power, told people that they were going to give them a bunch of free stuff and appeal to the working class and this and this and that in order to get themselves into power. And then because of that, they did really, really bad things. And you're saying that that isn't so communism? You know what I'm saying? That, you don't see the correlation there, you know? Does he not see the
It's
correlation there?
I mean, and it's like, it's not like we're on the far right. We're not on like authoritarian right conservatism. It's crazy. It's like we hate all authoritarianism. It's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
I mean, sure, whatever. Call Nazi Germany far right authoritarianism. That, yes, we hate far right authoritarianism too. I don't agree that it's far right authoritarianism, and I think plenty of people have made videos why that's not the case. But authoritarianism, it's bad, itself is a very, very bad, harmful thing that uses violence against people. So yes.
Yeah, right-wing extremism, left-wing extremism, they're all bad. And the reason why is because they use a state in order to prop themselves up. What they do is they go into the state, they be like, hey, I support the common people. I'm going to do this for the common people. I'm going to do this and this and this and that. And then they get themselves into power, and then they don't give up their power, and then they do really, really fucked up things. And that's, and these communists, they have it in their mind that, oh, if only we put a socialist person who is just socialism Jesus, that just knows the Das Kapital by heart and will actually bring us to the utopia. If only we put that person in power. If only we put Bernie Sanders in power, we would be good we would create this socialist utopia. But it's a religion. They think that the government is God, and if only or some magnificent some magnificent being is going to come into power and do all the right things and then create this beautiful socialist utopia. It's a religion. It's never going to happen. The state is not the way to create the utopia. Abolishing the state. I'm not a utopianist, but I believe abolishing the state is going to make us way, way better. It's going to get us way closer to a quote unquote utopia than having this socialist Jesus. If only we put the right person in power, that person will create socialism. That's basically all they believe.
Yeah, pretty much.
Than it is to communism. Fascism began when capitalists needed to revitalize profits, but were stopped by those pesky unions. So capitalists funded fascism in Italy and Germany, and once in power, those same fascists suppressed communist parties, labor unions, lowered taxes on the rich, outlawed strikes, privatized state-owned companies, and generally supported business. The word privatization.
Did he just say privatized state-owned companies? The fuck does that even mean?
Well, what he probably meant was like selling off the assets to a private company or something for them to take it over.
Okay, because that's a crazy name. A privatized
Yeah, that's like
state-owned company. That's
like that's like the USPS. That's like as if we sold off the USPS. Basically, that's what he's trying to say.
Okay, I don't know exactly how the USPS works, but I know it's heavily funded by the U.S. government.
Well, it is a government program. It is it's basically it's a government program that provides people free mail. Well, it's not free, but You know what I'm trying to say. But
Yeah, I know. It's public. It's
but
publicized.
I think it's a little bit weird that this guy is like, oh, this we gave this person power. He rose up to power, and then he did really, really bad things. But if only we put if only we put a socialist in his place, everything would be as right as rain. uh,
Yeah.
they
Also,
act like
I don't know where he got the idea that like capitalists like funded Hitler. I've never heard of that before. I don't know how he's substantiating that, but that's really interesting.
well, I mean, capitalists are always going to put money into government because it's going to benefit them. You know, they could use the government to get ahead of like other companies with regulations and things like that.
Interesting.
Was literally coined to describe fascist policies. To argue that fascism is left-wing or the same as communism would be to ignore who supported fascism and what fascism did. In reality, instead of a horseshoe, I would argue that ideology is more of a fishhook, with the far right sharing more in common with the centrists, who are ready to support fascism as soon as profit levels drop. This is another reason that fascism and communism are always incorrectly depicted to be two sides of the same coin. In fact, it's the central idea in a bunch of other arguments like communism is always implemented incorrectly, or communism only works on paper. If communism only works on paper, it's a good thing I live in paper. Anyway, these three arguments are essentially the same thing, so that's why I'm mushing them together into the same section. The idea that communism is inherently authoritarian is misleading, because it only developed these things after capitalism tried to crush it. In 1918 to 20, 14 capitalist nations invaded Soviet Russia to overthrow the communists, with the years of this civil war intensifying the Bolshevik siege mentality. The same pattern of imperialist capitalist
Wait,
powers
were those
invading to
people
protect
really
capital.
capitalist though? So you're talking about one state attacking another state. That's not simply
Yeah.
because were those how do you know that those countries were capital? Like, what do you mean by capitalists? Like, they had free markets. They had partial free markets. Were those real free markets?
Yeah, partial free markets.
You know what I'm saying? That's not capitalism. Like, what he's doing is he's taking crony capitalist or mixed market economies, right?
Corporatism.
And, yeah, that are lean towards capitalism, but are corporatism, like you just said. And then he's saying, "Oh, well, this country that leads more towards socialism, right? They got attacked by this more country that is corporatist. So that means that capitalism is bad because these corporatists killed us. But again, a capitalist company didn't send those troops over and killed those people. It was the state that did that. You know what I mean? So I think it's a little bit weird that he's blaming capitalism when soldiers, as far as I could tell, are funded by the state. They're funded by taxation.
Yeah, he's just wrapping it all up. He's doing the thing that he said that capitalists do to socialists, which is it's the opposite of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's like it's where you combine it all together. He's saying that capitalism is where wealthy individuals work together with the state to create like a monopoly that they own, but it's kind of but I don't know. That's sort of like how he defines
That's
it.
not capitalism. That's not free trade.
Yeah, exactly.
Capitalism is free trade. That's two people consensually transacting with each other. If there's government involved, then there's a third party that's coming in and forcing people to do what they say. That's not capitalism. He's attributing this to capitalism when it's not capitalism.
He's loading the term. Well, he's loading the term so that it seems really bad. When you say capitalist alliance, they're not really capitalist. They're like welfare state capitalists, sure, but they're not free market. They're not private property capitalists.
And do you think that those people went in there and was like, "Hey guys, we're capitalists. We're just here to save capitalism and kill these dirty socialism because they want to help the poors." Like,
Yeah.
I highly doubt that the people in that army were thinking that way.
No, I think they were thinking like goddamn, I want to go home or something
Or
like that.
one state. Generally, it's oh, my country is taking over this country. I'm here to fight for my country. You know what I'm saying? Something like along the lines of that. Back in those days, countries were fighting other countries because a lot of country people had felt kinship with their countries. They would identify with their countries. You know what I'm saying? So countries would attack other countries. You know, all the time. So simply because a country is more quote unquote capitalist than the Russia was at that time and they attacked them, that doesn't mean that capitalism attacked socialism. That's not capitalism. And that's not even
No.
full on socialism. It's a mixed market with more government control.
I think you could argue that capitalism can't attack by definition, because
Yeah.
if capitalism were to attack, therefore it would be invalidating the non-aggression principle, and therefore it wouldn't
Yeah.
be capitalism anymore. So I
Yeah,
don't
it's
think
not a free
capitalism
trade.
can be offensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
What can be seen in other countries that try to move beyond capitalism. The Spartacist uprising in Germany was suppressed by the Sucdems with fascist paramilitary forces in 1919. Catalonia was crushed by fascists in the Spanish Civil War
So
in
now
1930.
capitalism is fascism? Okay, sure. Why not?
I mean, again, he's basically anything that isn't socialism is capitalism, basically. That's
Yeah.
his whole ideology. Any country that doesn't identify with socialism, if they went to war with another country that doesn't identify with socialism, then it was because they supported capitalism. That's basically his whole ideology.
Yeah, pretty much.
In 1961 suffered from an invasion and afterwards decades of terrorism from the US, Chile in 1973, Nicaragua in 1986, the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and so much more. As we can see, capitalism will stop at nothing, even going as far as supporting fascism if it means stopping communism from threatening the flow of capital. The reality is that revolutionary countries are not going to be allowed to develop a socialism that is unhindered. Instead, what we see is a sort of siege socialism, with authoritarian measures being adopted just to fight back the onslaught of the West. In the whole context, we can see that the totalitarianism of communism is not a natural development, but an unnatural one caused by the constant barrage of capitalist terrorism. So when communist states fail to defend themselves from capitalist massacres and genocides, then capitalists laugh and pin the blame on communism's inherent weakness. But when communist states do defend themselves, when they implement strict security measures to protect their people from capitalist death squads, then the capitalists run decrying the commies for being power-hungry monsters who were just authoritarians seeking to seize state power all along. So if communism is bad and weak when it fails to defend itself, but is also bad and authoritarian when it does defend itself, then when would communism ever not be depicted to be villainous? The answer is never, because no matter what communist states do, it's always spun to be bad. This is not an argument. It's a dogma.
I mean, he said a whole lot of
Technically,
stuff.
he's not wrong. It is not really a good argument against communism. But again, his argument isn't really that straightforward either, which is that basically every country that isn't socialism, that gets attacked by a country that isn't socialism, is capitalism attacking socialism.
Yeah, pretty much.
So he's kind of looking at it from a very similar lens.
Yeah. I don't think that communism always results in a totalitarian dictatorship, but I do think that communism must be authoritarian in order to implement its policies. It must be. There's no other way, because otherwise everyone would just opt out of it. So you have to use force. There's just no other way to do it.
Yeah, Stalin in the beginning, I mean, he was going around saying that, oh, we shouldn't use force to force the workers. We'll have a revolution, organically. But eventually, when people weren't really following along with his ideology, he had no choice but to force people, to do what he wanted. In every case of socialism, this always happens because people aren't just going to be okay with giving up their property. People aren't just going to be okay with, socializing everything and communizing everything. So if people aren't okay with it, well, then they're the enemy, and they're the bourgeoisie, and we need to forcefully stop these guys, and by any means necessary, one way or another. It always leads to that.